All right. So the next trick is we're going to synchronize our microphones so I can sync up the tracks.
All right. So how do you do that?
So what I'm going to do is I'll count down from 5. I'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'll do it like in a steady count.
Yeah.
And I want you to join in on 3 and go 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
So that when I'm doing 2 audio files, I can find them and try and line them up.
I see. Okay.
So we'll see how well this works.
All right. You ready?
Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go.
Let's see how it goes.
Hopefully that worked. And cue the music. All right. So aloha and welcome. We're back for episode 3 of this podcast we're trying to do. And we are in a remote location. We're coming to you live from beautiful Hawaii.
The island of Maui.
That's right. Yeah. So we're on vacation, obviously. This is our Christmas holidays. And we've got the whole clan all the way out here to Maui to enjoy some beautiful sun as we can, get away from Canada in the winter there for just a few days. So we've talked about this in the past 2 episodes. We've been traveling a lot. We've talked about it a lot and all the considerations. We'll try not to go into too long, because we've talked about it in the last 2 episodes, but because we are traveling and we are in a remote location, let's talk about that for a few minutes. So how was the trip? How was the traveling? And, what are some of the things we had to do ahead of time to make this all happen?
A lot of planning beforehand, things like arranging equipment. So we have to have a lift to get me out of my wheelchair and into bed and back. A commode so I can go to the bathroom, because I don't fit on the toilet. And the most important part is a wheelchair van. And we booked that last May to make sure I would have it for Christmas, because it's such a busy time. And we did run into a young lady, well, maybe an older lady, whose van has disappeared, and now she has all kinds of issues trying to move on her wheelchair. But yeah, so just stuff like that. Booked our tickets back in June, and we normally go in the little business class, but we missed it because even in June it was sold out on the flight over, and we do have it on the flight back. It makes a lot of difference for me getting in and out of the chair to have the business class to get into the seat. But fortunately there was a couple of empty seats on the flight over, and the staff arranged it so Isabel and I would have an empty seat between us. So just stuff like that, making sure we get the handicapped room at the resort and everything, just to make it all work.
So literally preparing almost a year in advance, not just to book travel to Hawaii, which is, as we mentioned, the high season. So booking, anyone would have to book almost a year in advance to be able to come here during Christmas. But as you said, you booked the van in May. And it's now December, so we're coming up on 9 months ahead of time?
So obviously, because I need a lot more equipment, and there's very little of it available, you try to get your name in first. And the sad part is it's all very expensive, but that becomes a fact of life for us.
Yeah, so all this equipment that you mentioned, this is all in Hawaii. We're not carrying the commode and the lift and everything, and obviously the van we rented here, but all these big essential pieces of equipment you have to arrange to have in Hawaii prior to your arrival, right?
That's correct, yeah.
So we did all that, and thankfully all the equipment is here. We haven't had any significant issues. Everything has worked out mostly according to plan. You mentioned we had a handicapped room, accessible room here. What's the main differences about that? What are some main things that make it accessible to you?
Well, really, to be honest, the real difference is just having a roll-in shower instead of a shower with a step-in. So you can roll me in on the commode into the shower, and just has instead of having the shower head, it has the wand, so you can hose me down and clean me off. So really, that's truly the only difference for the handicap room here.
All right. And one last thing, we'll just talk about Hawaii in general. We mentioned last time different cities have different accessibility for wheelchairs, especially a motorized one such as yours. How do you find Maui in general as getting around in a wheelchair?
I was actually surprised because Lahaina is quite an old part of the island, but there are curb cuts virtually everywhere, and we have managed to get around quite well. We're up in Kanapali, and there's a long boardwalk, and it's very easy to get on and ride back and forth. So that's been quite good.
Excellent. All right, so now we'll get into a bit of the main topic I want to talk about today. So on day one of your arrival, well, maybe, yeah, we'll call it arrival day. Day zero is the travel day. And so the first real full day we had in Maui, we actually went down to the beach where you had your accident. So before we get into this, I'd like you just to recount the story of your accident just briefly. I know we've been over it quite a bit, and people probably have read it on the website and such. But just recount the story as you remember it about your accident, and tell a little bit about the context so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so my accident happened March 30th of 2016, and Isabel and I had gone to a little beach, which is right beside Big Beach. Actually, they worked hard on those names. And we just had gone into the water to cool off because it was obviously a warm day. And we were just riding up and down on the waves and not really doing anything. And we're backing out of the water. You don't turn your back to the ocean. And the last wave was coming. We're very close to the shore at this point. And I said to Isabel, we'll dive through the last wave here and we'll go on shore. And we dove into the wave and I got twisted around. The wave drove my head into the sand and instantly paralyzed me. And so, believe it or not, I drowned and died, and Isabel dragged me out of the water, and they revived me on the beach with CPR. And I spent 4 months in hospital in Vancouver and 5.5 months in rehab. And I've been home almost a year now.
So, what are your first memories? Because you said you drowned and effectively died, and that's kind of been confirmed by what Isabel and others have said. So, what is your first memory? Do you remember it all being revived on the beach, the ambulance ride, any of this?
No, the only thing I vaguely remember is they had to pull me up and over some rocks. So they had tied me to the backboard, and they were pulling me up, and I remember coming to, I think twice, saying, I can't breathe, because I had lost virtually all of my ability to breathe on my own. And they were using the bag to pump air into me. And I remember the lifeguard saying, just a minute. And then I could feel movement, and then I would faint again. But really, that's all I remember of the whole event on the beach and into the ambulance.
So, as I said, we went back and we visited that beach, or at least as near as we could get to it, because as you mentioned, you literally had to climb over like a cliff face. This isn't a few boulders that were on the beach, like literally 20, 30 feet of cliff that you can scale. I mean, you're not rock climbing or anything, but it's a steep climb up and then a steep climb down to the next beach, which is where you had your injury. So you don't really remember much, but as you were saying, they strapped you backboard and had to literally scale you over this cliff face to get you back to the next beach to where the ambulance was. So we visited that beach as near as we could get to it, and we took in the scene for a few minutes. What were you thinking? How were your feelings about going to the beach? Were you nervous about it before you got there? What are your thoughts about it?
I don't think so. I just, as I say, visited the scene of the crime and just remember it's the last place in my life I ever walked. So that was a bit bizarre when you think of it that way. I walked down the path to the beach, and that was the last path I ever walked down. And so, it's a bit sad to think I won't have to worry about walking down the path. We couldn't get anywhere on the beach, obviously. In my wheelchair, I just sank into the sand. So we stood at the very edge and just looked at the ocean and looked at the sign that said, be careful of waves crashing on the beach because they could break your neck. And I'm the person that it happened to.
So a little bit of sadness there, reflecting on, like I said, the last place you walked, which has got to be a weird feeling. But you weren't like nervous about it. You weren't anxious about prior to visiting it.
I don't think so. I don't think anxious is a good word. I just think I wanted to go and see it, try to see what I remember, and find the people that saved me.
Do you get nervous about the ocean? The idea of going near the ocean, or you can't exactly, but if you could get in the ocean, would that make you nervous?
I don't think I'm ready to go in the ocean. I don't feel the need or the interest in doing it right now. So I guess it would make me feel nervous, but I don't have that interest to do it right now.
Fair enough. Now, we've been here for a few days, and the rest of us, Isabel, myself, and the other kids and significant others, have all been out snorkeling, swimming, and doing all sorts of stuff in the ocean. Do you get nervous with us going out in the ocean?
No, it was a freak accident. Freely admit it. It's just one of those things. We weren't doing anything wrong or exciting. It's like tripping and hitting your head. You never planned for it. You're not doing anything wrong. It just happened. So I'm just not ready to revisit that feeling of going in the water like that.
Yeah, fair enough. And I don't know how about the others feel, but I know at least for myself, even though I am still snorkeling, I'm doing all these things I would have done otherwise. It does cross my mind. I think about it. I'm much more aware of the waves. I'm much more aware of the power they have. And I don't know. It's hard to say because you don't really think about these things. But I think before I was more willing and carefree about just, whatever, big wave, will dive under it. But now diving under any wave, it definitely crosses my mind that don't screw it up. And like you say, it's a freak accident. You can't really prevent it, but it is in your mind. It does,
Yeah, it's a lot different from you because you get to watch it, whereas I get to live it, so.
Yeah, but, it is one of those things that crosses my mind. It is interesting that it's something I never, ever thought about. Like, even when the waves were big, it just didn't cross my mind at all. It was just a wave. But now, being all too familiar with how simply it can go wrong, and even if you do everything right, it can go wrong. So that is something that crosses my mind. Hasn't stopped me from enjoying it, but it has definitely been in my mind and perhaps limited some of the more carefree things I would have done. But anyway, so it's a very interesting experience, I think, for both of us, especially for you to visit the place where it occurred and to, as you say, visit the place you last walked. Now, we visited the beach primarily for you to see it and just take in the scene, as you put it. But our ultimate goal was to try and find the lifeguards who were there that day, who revived you on the beach and hauled you over this cliff face and got you into the ambulance and ultimately to the hospital. So that day I went up to the lifeguard shack and I showed them a photo that somebody had kindly taken of the lifeguards and said, do you recognize it? And we were fortunate enough and miraculously enough that 3 of the lifeguards that were there that day that were first on the scene and pulled you out of the water were there the day we visited. And they were thrilled and happy to come over and meet you and talk to you and interact with you a bit more. So I still can't believe this wasn't prearranged. We hadn't contacted them before. We didn't even really know who these people were. We just showed up on the day we decided to show up, and they happened to be there. So we're going to talk about this. We interacted with them for a good half hour, and we talked to them at length, or at least you talked to them at length. So let's talk about this for a few minutes. Were you nervous about meeting the lifeguards at all?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I was nervous or, I'm sure they would remember something like that, but maybe they have lots of these incidents and I was just one of many. I don't think I was, because they knew everything about that day that happened, and I think I was thankful. Nice to say thank you for saving my life, bringing me back from the dead, and they were very forthcoming and talking about the accident. They seemed to have very vivid memories of it, and they seemed really happy to actually meet me. Being in aviation, when there's an incident on the airplane and you're trying to bring somebody who's very sick in to the hospital as quick as you can, they get off the airplane on the ambulance and you never see or hear from them again, so you never know the outcome. So I think it was a bit of closure for them, so they know that all their efforts paid off, and I'm truly thankful for everything they did.
So as we mentioned, you had a good conversation, but how was that interaction? Like, what do you say to somebody who did that? Like, I know it's hard to put into words, so how did that interaction go? How were the first few exchanges you guys had?
Thank you for saving my life. Very emotional. I don't know what else to say. I said, I'm so glad you guys did your job and saved my life. And I said, do many people come back? And it's very interesting that they did something which was called extreme CPR, which, if I understand, is double the rate of normal CPR. Very exhausting, and it was really the first time they used it, and they brought me back. And one guy said he'd been working almost 12 years on the beach, and he's actually managed to bring 3 people back with CPR. So very rare, but it does work, and I'm one of the very rare exceptions. So it was very, I think, gratifying for me is a good word to say thanks for these guys for everything they did for me.
So talking to them and learning about this extreme CPR they did and how few people they revive and all of this and some of the realities you learned, did it bring in some of the reality of the situation? Did you learn more about your accident talking to them that you already didn't know, or did you realize more about how severe your accident was talking to these guys?
Yeah, I think so. I think I learned they kept saying to me, "What do you mean you don't remember? You were communicating with us." And they said, when they got to me, they said I was gray, I wasn't breathing. The people on the beach helped Isabel get me out of the water and started CPR right away. And that's really probably what saved my life. And then the lifeguards came over the hill and started doing the other CPR on me. And as they say, when they look at me, they say, we're going to give it a try, but not that optimistic because it's very rare that it brings somebody back. And they felt I was not a good candidate at the time. And then suddenly I was starting to move and wake up. And as they said to Isabel, say something, I think he's coming back. And being the romantic that she is, she said, this story isn't over. You still owe me 30 years on the marriage contract. And they look at her and go, really? But it worked, and my eyes opened, and I started trying to breathe again. And then they said, well, we communicated, and they didn't want me to shake my head or nod my head because I had a neck injury. They said, if you understand what I'm saying, blink once. And I looked at him and I blinked, and wow, he's really in there. And we'll try it again. Now, this time we need you to blink twice. And I looked at him and I blinked twice, and they're going, this is incredible. And we'll do the third time, so blink 3 times. And apparently I did. And they said, well, he obviously understands and his brain is working. A lot of issues are when you're not breathing, you get a lot of brain damage. And I feel because the people on the beach started CPR so quickly, within a minute or 2 of me dying, it gave me an incredible opportunity to recover without any brain damage. And then the lifeguards did the rest to actually bring me back.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And like I said, all of us were there, and it is, at least for me, it kind of brought some of the reality of the accident. Like I said, I wasn't there. I arrived a few days later after you were in hospital, and although the gravity of the situation certainly set in, seeing you in the hospital in the ICU, the details of the beach, I don't really have many of, right? Because Mom has what she has, and she has told the story, 1,000 times. But a lot of the details, it's hard to believe. But when you have 3 lifeguards standing in front of you and saying that you didn't look good, that you were gray, and that, like as you say, it was not a great candidate, but here you are, and like you say, it's ultimately to the success and the assistance of just strangers on the beach. Like, although lifeguards did incredible work doing CPR and getting you going, as you said, it was complete strangers, bystanders on the beach who just jumped into action and did CPR and got you going, as it were, and as you say, probably saved a lot of what you have left.
Yeah, it's, again, being in the United States and with all the recent issues with politics, all I can say is America and Americans are great. Everybody that day jumped up and did what they could to save my life. Just from the people on the beach, the lifeguards were saying, people on the beach started calling 911 right away, but somebody ran to the top of the hills and was screaming and waving his arms and got the lifeguards' attention, and they started running well before the 911 call came in. So you save 2 or 3 minutes. Well, it's the difference of me being brain damaged and me being just my normal wacky self, which some people say is brain damage, but that's just another story.
Your normal wacky self making a podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, so I guess my last question about the beach is, now you've visited and you've talked to the lifeguards and experienced it all, do you feel different? Like you said earlier, it was a good closure for them and yourself. How do you feel now that you've been and not only seen the beach and seen the accident, but met the people personally who saved you?
Yeah, I think I feel better that I got to say thank you in person. I think it's a big thing, and I should try to find the people on the beach that helped bring me back as well, and we'll see how that goes. I don't know if they're here in Maui or if they live on the mainland, but I'll work on that too. But I think I'll go back to the beach occasionally and just look at the waves and remember that day and the life that was and what we're doing now.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave anybody out. As I said, we got to interact with the lifeguards, and that was a very emotional experience because they did a whole lot to get you where you are today. But as we've said countless times, there were many, many other people who were just complete bystanders and strangers who did an incredible amount to keep you going and to get you where you are today. So if any of those people are listening, I think it's easy to say thank you and reach out, and we'll find our way, and eventually we will get to meet you face to face and say thank you from both of us, from all of us, I think. Well, that was an emotional conversation. Yeah. But I think it was really good. It's been a really good vacation. It's been really nice to enjoy Maui in the sun, but it was also amazing, I think, for you and for everyone to go to the beach, to experience it, and also to meet the people who helped save your life that day. So I think with that, we'll start wrapping it up and save the rest of the conversation for another episode. You can follow us on Facebook under Jim Ryan Rolling Through Life. We also have a website at myquadriplegic.life where we share stories written by Jim and from the family members, just stories that we reflect on around Jim's life as a quadriplegic. Some of them, everything from the accident. You can read Isabel's story about her perspective of the accident that we've talked about today. Everything from that to Jim going through rehab and all of the kids meeting Jim after his accident in ICU. So endless stories. You can go to myquadriplegic.life for those. We are also working on a YouTube channel under Jim Ryan. We're just doing different videos there, sharing the life that Jim leads now as a quadriplegic, different things he does. We've done videos on how he uses a computer, how we record these podcasts with a computer, how Jim uses iPhone and iPad, how he gets around in his wheelchair, all sorts of stuff. We're going to try and keep making those as we go. We're going to try and keep making these podcasts as well. We don't have a schedule because both of us live very hectic lives. And at the moment, we're on opposite coasts of Canada. Jim in BC and myself in Nova Scotia for the next few months at the very least. So we got to learn how to do this long distance. And once we get over that hurdle, we hope to have more episodes coming out, but don't expect a regular schedule. We'll do our best. Hopefully 1 month or so is kind of what I'm aiming for. So expect those. And as always, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, thanks again so much for listening. Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes, and if you want to leave us some general feedback about the show, the best place to do that is probably on the website. Just go to www.myquadriplegic.life/podcast. Just put a comment underneath the episode, and we'll try and get back to you in a later episode. So if you have questions for Jim or just some thoughts on what we've talked about today, feel free to share them there, and hopefully we'll talk about them later in the show. Thanks again for listening. See you in the next one.